Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. My name is Bethany Dotson. I'm a relationship coach and a yoga therapist for professional high achieving women. I'm going to go live with you today and talk about how to go from settling to soaring after your divorce or the breakup of a destructive, unhealthy relationship, a toxic relationship. And if you have questions for me today on this topic, please feel free to drop them in the comment box below, and I will do my best to answer you. So I want to talk about this because it's a very common thing that I see. All of my clients have suffered from this in one way or another. I would say about 80% of the people that I work with have been out of a divorce, out of a marriage, out of a toxic relationship for years. At least a year. 1 to 4 years is kind of like the range that I tend to draw people in. And they are still massively stuck emotionally, in spite of talk therapy, in spite of taking time off, in spite of all the things that they've tried to do, right? Going back to work, just trying to get on with their life. And I want to talk about how to get out of that stuckness, how to break free from that emotional stuckness. And before I go further, I have to say, you have to really want to break out of that. Not that you wouldn't necessarily want to, but I'm going to talk about how it's so easy to stay there. So this is for you if you are struggling to move forward and it's been years. This is for you if you're still kind of living in the rearview mirror. I once read a comment thread, and I would say 60 to 70% of the people that responded in that comment thread had been emotionally stuck for many, many years after they left a toxic marriage or a toxic relationship. So the main reason that you find yourself kind of stuck, living in anxiety, a lot of the people I work with wake up feeling anxious. They go to bed feeling anxious. They're worried about the future. They keep thinking and obsessing about the past. It becomes an emotional and psychological trap. And that often stirs up a lot of physical symptoms as well, like weight gain from, producing too much cortisol in the system, comfort eating, IBS, reproductive health issues, all kinds of things that kind of arise from this anxiety-ridden stuckness. And the reason that you get used to that, the reason it's so hard to move out of that quicksand is because your body gets habituated. Your body gets normalized to feeling anxiety. So for example, if you were in a destructive relationship or an unhealthy relationship, where you were used to kind of walking on eggshells, right? It was good some of the times, and then when it was bad, it was really bad. You get used to having this sense of hypervigilance about you. You are waiting for the next shoe to drop, even when things are going really good. And in that environment, in a relationship like that, your body produces certain chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline is a chemical that we produce that's highly addictive. So you hear the term adrenaline junkie, there's no joke behind that. You can become an adrenal fatigue. It can be a result of that as well. So when you're in an environment like that, your brain actually changes. We know in trauma studies now that the part of your brain responsible for your fight or flight response, right? The quickening of your heart rate, the clenching in your chest, the clenching in your stomach, the knots in your stomach, holding your breath, all of that, that part of your brain becomes larger because you're using that part of your brain more frequently. Just as if you were to go to the gym and work your biceps on a more regular basis, your biceps would become bigger. Same here, your amygdala, fight or flight response center in your brain becomes larger. And so when you exit a relationship like that, while you might feel an initial sense of relief or some relief, your body just doesn't necessarily bounce back to normal, the old you, the way you were long before you ever entered into that kind of a relationship. Your body is still used to feeling anxious. is still used to dealing with chaos, is still used to kind of walking on eggshells and waiting for the next bad thing to happen, or wondering if you're really going to survive or make it, and if you're going to work out in the relationship. Your body is still used to living in a state of chaos and uncertainty and not really knowing what's going to happen next. And so, but just by leaving the relationship, your body is still going to look for that response. And most of the time, 90% of the time, this looks like thinking about your past, because your thoughts alone can trigger that fight or flight response, that same chemical response that you felt when you were still actively with your ex. And you'll think about the past. This is why so many people get hooked, like addicted almost, to narcissistic research. And they kind of go down the black hole of researching narcissism, because they're just taking one source that fueled their body's addiction to cortisol and adrenaline and replacing it with something else. And I was guilty of this. I will be very honest. And so narcissistic research, or thinking about your ex, or thinking about worrying about the future, or thinking about, what if I start dating again and I meet another asshole? What if I start dating again and I meet and I can't trust myself, and it happens all over again because it's already happened like 2 or 3 times and I don't really know what to do. And so just by your thoughts alone, you can keep yourself handicapped emotionally and emotionally stuck in this fight or flight response that's going on and off all the time, daily. And not ironically, but probably coincidentally, many of the people that I've worked with have also been in very demanding and or draining careers, meaning they're working a lot, they're overwhelmed, they feel spread too thin, they're super stressed out all the time. The job isn't even their dream passion thing that they're doing. They're just doing it because it pays the bills. Sometimes it pays the bills really well, but that also plays into that emotional stuckness and feeling like you are spread too thin, feeling like you're packing your schedule, that you never have enough time in your calendar. You constantly have things that are falling through the cracks. You never feel like you're caught up. That is actually, and can very well be, a trauma response, because your body is still programmed from the bad relationship to a negative emotional state. And then we just take that negative emotional state and start looking for things, unconsciously start looking for things in life to create that same scenario. So we get to feel the same feelings of anxiety, walking on eggshells, not really getting your needs met, feeling unfulfilled. And it becomes this big unconscious habit. And a lot of people will then, from this point, emotionally begin dating again, because they start feeling so blah that they look outside of themselves, whether it's dating, getting on a dating app, or whether it's, taking a trip they can't afford, or spending money on something that, they're living beyond their means, trying to get fulfillment outside of themselves. And so I call this whole big thing a negative feedback loop. You're thinking in the past, you're worrying about the future. All of this causes a biochemical response in your body. You feel an emotion, you feel anxious, you feel worried, you feel uncertain. That triggers adrenaline, that triggers cortisol, it triggers a bunch of neuropeptides from your brain to your body. And then beyond that, your body gets so used to feeling all of those things that your body will send a signal up to your brain that causes you to think about that time that your ex cheated on you for the 15th time. Or your body will send a signal to your brain to think about, I really want to start dating again, but I'm super scared or anxious that I'm going to make the same mistake. Or I'm really worried my boss is an asshole. And so your body will send little signal messengers up to your brain to get you to think about that, so that you can feel anxious, so you can feel kind of emotionally stuck. And this is not easily corrected. In fact, I want to talk about 2 common ways that are traps that kind of keep you locked into this cycle, whether consciously or unconsciously. And the first one is that you spend a lot of time talking about it. And we know in trauma recovery that talking about your past keeps you in your past emotionally. You might talk to your friends about it. I had a client one time who had been 2 years out of an emotionally abusive marriage. And she was, even in spite of many, many months of talk therapy and counseling, she was extremely still stuck. Any chance that she could get, she would talk to me at first. She would talk to her counselor, her friends, her family, the guy at the grocery store bagging her groceries about her ex, all the bad things that her ex did to her, because talking about it gave her that same hit, that same emotional chemical dump in her body, so that she could feel, okay, this is normal. I'm used to, my ex was so chaotic. I'm used to feeling so chaotic. Let me talk about it so I can feel all these feelings again and feel like my normal self. What actually happens is that the more you talk about it, the more you relive it, the more you experience it emotionally, the more you stay stuck. And the more you do that, the more peace, the more joy, the more optimism, the idea of a future without that, the idea of actually meeting someone amazing, the idea of actually living your life and having a glorious, amazing, confident, fulfilled, abundant life feels really uncomfortable. It feels awkward. And sadly, I've spoken to many women who, when the thought of actually leaving behind the past and stepping forward into a new future is actually too scary for them. It's too threatening. It's too unknown. It's too uncertain, ironically. And so a lot of people will actually choose to stay over here in the past and stay in Stuckville, stay in their comfort zone, which is emotional stuckness and settling, rather than choosing to go into the unknown and step into a life where they are soaring and they're having fulfilling relationships and they're breaking the cycle of emotional unavailability in their dating life, and just settling and stuckness in other aspects of their life. So talking about it, if you're talking about your past, if you're talking to your girlfriends about how shitty dating is, if you're talking about, anybody who will listen, that is fueling that emotional and mental pattern that you have, and it's not really doing anything to get you out of it. The second thing that people do, that I see women do, is to cope with it. And coping is not the same thing as healing. So coping can look like a lot of things. The most common things that I see in my clients is overworking, staying extremely busy, having a hard time relaxing or feeling guilty if they're relaxing. The anxiety and the fight or flight that they've been living in for so long keeps them on a very short leash. They don't ever really get to enjoy their life or experience just pleasure in their life. They're constantly unconsciously choosing things and deprioritizing themselves so that they feel spread thin, and guess what? More anxious. So coping, overworking, zoning out to Netflix. I once talked to someone, I talk to a lot of people. I don't work with people who have substance abuse addictions or drug dependencies, but unfortunately, I speak to many people who have, kind of an alcohol thing. They have a bottle of wine every night. That's like normal for them to unwind, or they need to get high every night to go to sleep, or, living beyond their means, spending too much money, right? Getting a dopamine fix when they, buy the car that they can't really afford, or get into a car payment that's a little bit in over their head. And all of these things, getting into dating again when they probably aren't really ready. They really haven't done any deeper inner work around healing their pattern. They think that just a little bit of time off is what they need to get back into dating. So all of these things are common coping strategies that I see in my clients. And they're just that. They don't really do, they're temporary sugar highs. They're Band-Aids. They don't do anything to heal the deeper subconscious psychology or the lingering relational trauma, the imprints of that emotionally and in your brain subconsciously. So those are some common things. Other common tactics that are a little bit more subtle are saying things, telling yourself things like, I'm too busy to open myself up to relationship. When it happens, it happens. If it's in God's will, and I don't want to knock anybody's faith here for sure, but I often see people using statements like this to justify why they don't feel comfortable, or to justify staying stuck, and for sure to justify never wanting to open themselves up to relationship again. And I understand that when you've been through a really painful experience in a relationship, it's tricky. It's tricky to open yourself up to that again. It feels like for many people returning to the crime scene. But I can tell you this: the longer you stay with your heart shut down, the longer you stay in a mode of settling in your life, as one of my coaches and teachers has said famously, the more you settle in life, that's what happens to you. You continue to get into situations that are settling, that are emotionally unhealthy for you, that are draining, that are toxic in some way. So not settling has to be your first choice in order to change. You have to make that decision that you're willing to peel the layers of the onion off. You're willing to look at your own behavior. You're willing to do some deeper inner work and not just surfacey talking about it, right? A lot of this stuff is held subconsciously. Beliefs that you've developed over time are held subconsciously. We don't access that by just talking about it on a therapist couch. We have to do more specific, strategic processes to get to that. Living in anxiety, right? That could be your comfort zone. And again, we don't really heal that just by talking about it. You might let some steam off, right? If you just vent about it for a little bit, but eventually you're going to wake up the next day or wake up 2 days later, and your brain and your body are going to go right back to where they were before, because that's your norm. So we have to do holistic practices to heal relational trauma. It's been proven in more and more research studies that relational trauma, specifically interpersonal violence, healing emotional abuse, healing narcissistic abuse, healing these transgressions that have happened between you and someone that you loved, who in some way trespassed your boundaries, who violated your emotional safety. That has to happen from a mind-body standpoint, from a mind-body process, because we know that trauma is not just stored or processed logically in your brain. It's held in your body. There are even studies now that say trauma and emotional imprints from that are held in the lining of your cells, and there are like zillions of cells in your body. So this is one of the main reasons, like if you logically know, if you start dating someone new and you logically know this person probably isn't good for you, you see all the red flags, they're like waving in the wind, and then you move forward anyway, this is because that's your programming subconsciously, and your subconscious programming and the things that you have memorized over your lifetime in your body are going to be stronger and greater than the little 5% of your logical mind that's going, yeah, I see that red flag. So you have to use a mind-body process. Some kind of somatic work is really, really great. I was just listening to Dr. Laura Berman. She's a famous psychologist, sex therapist, a relationship therapist, and she's a talk therapist by training. And even she said, when you're healing some kind of trauma, when you're healing some kind of relational trauma that's happened to you, that's interfering with your relationships, you need to be using a somatic approach, something that uses your body, that brings your body into the picture. And when you get your body into the picture, you learn how to regulate your emotions on your own. You learn how to stay in the present moment. You learn how to deal with triggering situations like an ex without letting it take you out for a couple of weeks. You learn how to let go of anger, of guilt, of repressed sadness, of repressed grief, of all the things that you've shut down or try to stuff under the rug in a more effective way, without needing to spend 5 years analyzing it or talking about it. So it allows you to come to a more balanced, even present place where you get off the train of worrying if you're good enough, worrying about the future, obsessing about the past, worrying if the next guy that you date is going to be a narcissist, worrying if you'll ever meet anybody, worrying that there are too many, you're too old now, or worrying that, there's not enough, there's no good men out there, whatever the case may be for you. You stop that loop of thinking, which causes you to feel in a negative way. You stop believing and buying into your own story that this is as good as it's going to get, or you might as well just stay here because going out into the unknown is too scary. So when you do that and you're able to emotionally regulate and take control of your own emotions, then you can start redirecting your emotions to healthier places, like gratitude, like joy, like abundance, like happiness, like excitement, enthusiasm, optimism. These are all things that when I've spoken with clients and when I've worked with clients, these things were largely missing in their life. They were still living under a rock in Blauville. And when you can begin to shift your emotions by yourself without needing to go buy something new, without needing to get on Hinge or without needing to get on Tinder and hook up with somebody, then these circumstances in your life start to change. That's how you begin to go from settling in your life to soaring and seeing significant changes on the outside, like finally meeting an amazing, emotionally available partner after years of repeating the same pattern. That's how you go from settling in a job that's not really your thing, that overworks you, that you're stressed out about all the time, to a different career, making more money than you've ever made before, making more of an impact, whatever the case may be for you. So you have to use a trauma-informed, holistic mind-body approach to get you out of that stuckness. You have to take control of your emotions and then redirect your emotions to what it is that you want. And this whole process is something that I take my clients through when I work with them, in much, much more deeper than that. I just kind of give you a high-level overview, but that's how you can go. That gives you an idea. If you're stuck, if it's been like years, someone once told me it had been 7 years since she'd left her ex and she was still emotionally stuck, right? That's a lot of life. That's a lot of life that you're not living. If you're ready to live your life, if you're a professional, if you're career oriented, if you've tried other things like talk therapy and you're still stuck, then reach out to me. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. We'll have a conversation. We'll talk about what it would look like if your life was where you wanted it to be. If you were dating and getting into a wonderfully amazing relationship, we would talk about what your life is like when you're unstuck. If I think that I can help you realistically get there, get from point A to point B, I'll talk about what that might look like. And if not, then we'll send you on your way to a referral. So bethanydotson.com/talk. If you are ready to stop settling, if you are ready to get your life back, your confidence back, your joy back after a destructive relationship, if you want to ultimately attract a conscious partner and have an amazing relationship in your future, and you've been on the hamster wheel of repeatedly attracting unavailable partners, if you identify yourself as probably being a people pleaser, being an overachiever, probably having codependent tendencies or traits, then definitely book a call. Go to bethanydotson.com/talk. If you have any questions about what I shared with you today, let me know, and I will see you all next week. Bye.